Hey guys, it's Chris and I'm back with Raised by Wolves episode 1, aptly titled Raised by Wolves. So let's jump right in. Raised by Wolves by Ridley Scott. This is the first episode. They've dropped 3 episodes as the premiere, and then every Thursday from this point on HBO Max, they will release another episode. So it'll be more like a season as opposed to like Netflix where they dump it all at one time. You watch it in 1 or 2 days. You talk about it for 3 days and then it's over. And I was going into this, I'm not really a big sci-fi freak, Star Wars, Star Trek. I love those things. But I've been more into fantasy as an adult or whatever. But this is the first sci-fi thing that really caught my eye, mainly because of Ridley Scott, and the visuals just look stunning on the 2 trailers that I did videos on as well. So spoiler warning, we're going to review Raised by Wolves episode 1, and then I'll watch episodes 2 and 3 and drop videos on those as well. And then we'll start next Thursday with a episode 4 review as well and go through the entire season. I'm not really even sure if it's 10 episodes or 8 or whatever for the first season. First of all, the visuals are outstanding. They're going to be great. You have the 2 androids that were programmed to take these human embryos off planet Earth after it's been destroyed in a religious war, apparently. And that's really the thing here. It's basically a religious motif, going on as far as the dichotomy of religion versus atheism and all that kind of stuff. And they're exploring that in a slightly different way, I think. So it's really interesting so far, even though that's been done before in this particular setting. And the way they're going to twist this a little bit, I think, seems to be pretty cool so far. So they arrive on Kepler 22b, I believe, is the name of this planet. Apparently, it's one of the only planets that can support human life. And so they arrive here. They kind of set up everything. So the first half of the episode is not really action-packed or anything. Not that you need that all the time, obviously, and you really don't. For the best stories, you actually have, dialogue and things like that. And so they arrive there. They set up camp, essentially. I really love the pop-up tent, by the way. That was really, really interesting. I wish I had one of those for when I go camping. She just throws out a little ball, and it just blows up into a fully functional and powered tent, essentially. And immediately, mother and father get to work. They basically had brought 12 human embryos. They had 6 of them. I guess 6 didn't survive the flight or something. And get to work having kids. He plugs in some umbilical cords into her stomach. These kids grow up in these little plexiglass boxes and pop out. What's interesting is you have kind of a main kid, number 6, the 6th one born. Kind of the traditional, he was born, wasn't breathing, but he was a fighter, and she seemed to care and even cried over him. Then he started to breathe. And over time, you realize that, he is going to be the chosen one in some aspect, or at least we're going to be led to believe that. And he ends up being the only kid to survive. Essentially, all these other kids, they start dying off one at a time, and it seems to start with a cough. That's good timing. You have mother and father there kind of basically just watching out over him. Father seems to be a lot more human-like, where mother is a little bit more dry, and ends up being, she's fucking cray-cray. So anyway, she's telling the kids, she's giving these sermons, essentially, and that's kind of the dichotomy I really like to explore about religion versus atheism, is she's giving these sermons to these kids saying, we're atheists, we don't believe in nonsense, essentially, we only believe in science. But of course, these are human children, and they start to question things. And even one of the kids, I think Cambion actually said, but what if it all is real? So really good as far as the setup. I mean, you get the basic idea of what's going on. There's another human vessel orbiting the planet now. Father understands this. He somehow knows, I don't know if he picks it up or he has a sensor or something. Maybe he's programmed differently by somebody else. Maybe that was the plan the entire time. But he realizes they're orbiting the ship and they're going to send down landing parties. And of course, mother wants nothing to do with them. She thinks it's perfectly fine that 5 kids have died and the one lone child is there by himself with no other humans to talk to on this desolate planet with these big-ass holes, by the way. The big-ass holes. I got to bring the big-ass holes up. When they land, they immediately show you with the great visuals on this show, these giant-ass holes, and they find this skull. They dig this skull up out of the ground. It's like a giant dragon-looking snake creature. And you'd seen this crop circle around camp this whole entire time throughout the years as they kind of skipped, time jumped or whatever. And she ends up digging up around this crop circle and ends up being like the entire vertebrae of this giant snake thing. And I got a feeling the way they brought these holes back up, because they had to go back down in one of the holes to reach their old ship that had fell into one and try to signal the ark or whatever, because Father wanted him to be able to talk to these other humans and interact with them because he knew that was in his best interest to spend time with other humans. Well, Mother was completely just by the book, by her programming, whatever it may be, and wanted to keep this kid isolated by himself, even though all his brothers and sisters had died from some weird thing that we really don't know what the hell it is, except for one little girl who apparently fell into one of these holes. And when she found that kid, realized she had fell down in one of these giant holes, she just literally howled like a wolf. But really interesting, again, Cambion, number 6 or whatever, he was the narrator, kind of narrating the first little bit of the show till it caught up with the present or whatever. But then he circles back around at the end, which I thought was really good and really well done. We had definitely some Ridley Scott style Alien shout outs here. Whenever Mother got overexerted herself, they say the androids kind of wear down over time. They have no more power packs. So once they start to get low on power, they start to degrade and break down and everything. But she bleeds white. The white goo from Aliens, like every android in Aliens, if you were familiar with the Alien movies, they all had an android and they bled white. Think about David in Prometheus or something like that. The white goo that comes out, essentially their blood, whatever. They need an oil change. That's what they got to replace is the white goo. So definitely an Alien shout out there. I don't believe this is in the same universe as Alien. It would be kind of cool. But then again, you don't want to kind of overtake this story with aliens or whatever and make it about them and xenomorphs and whatever. I did not see any references to the Weyland Corporation or anything, so I don't believe this is going to be in the same universe. It was really cool, I thought, how she was so by the book and dry and didn't have any humor or emotion, where Father makes you question what humans programmed him, because he seemed to be empathetic. He seemed to have emotion. He laughed and played with the kids. He wanted the kids to be around other kids regardless of their beliefs or whatever. And of course, because he was cool, the cool dad, Mother ended up killing him because she's some kind of fucking war machine who ended up having some dream where she was flying around back on planet Earth during the war. There was like a flashback sequence there for a second, and you saw all the cities getting decimated and the ships going by and laser beams and whatever and all that kind of sci-fi stuff. But then, of course, when the humans show up, because they do in fact land and find this kid when all the other children have died and Father is now gone as well, which I thought that was odd to kill him off so quickly. But I guess he kind of served his purpose. Maybe he'll come back as another android or whatever, since he is an android, so maybe the actor can come back. We'll see. They show up kind of medieval style too. I like that little mix. You got it's a futuristic thing. It's sci-fi, but you're on this desolate planet. So they're coming down with their white cloaks on and their like emblazoned sun on their chest, almost like a medieval armor type thing, even carrying shields in some cases. So I thought that was kind of cool. Kind of an old West vibe there mixed with futuristic stuff at the same time, because they do have technology. But they know they're dealing with androids, and they even say, like, when they get old and start breaking down, they can become dangerous. So Mother's a little more than dangerous, I would say, because if she screams, your fucking head explodes. What I also thought was really good is Cambion, number 6, the last kid alive, who seems to be perfectly fine in relation to the other. He doesn't have the cough yet or whatever. You can see that he's kind of picking up on weird things about Mother throughout the entire time he's growing up or whatever, but he never really accepted it. He still protected her when she seemed to be broken down or whatever. So that was interesting. And I thought it was a really good line with Father that he said something to the effect of talking to Mother when they were having their little argument about what to do with the last kid, since the rest of them died. He said every death of, he's talking about other kids dying, his brothers and sisters essentially, with every death pushes him closer to disbelief. So that went back to the, atheism versus the religion type thing. And so he actually started to pray to some god or whatever, whether it's Christianity or not, they didn't really say. But it kind of reminds you of the Crusades and the colors they were wearing, the other humans as well. So I think that's obviously the reference there. So that's really interesting, but he let him do it. He knew that he was human. He knew that he needed other human interaction, where Mother is just straight by the book. She's going by her programming. So it's really curious to me how they're so different, being androids with the same mission. So who programmed who? She turns into this kind of gold robot who can fly with, like a cross, and that's obviously, symbolism as well. And she, had this flashback to where she was this war machine on Earth. That's the best thing. Think about a golden Iron Man with really freaky powers. That's kind of the way I thought about it. And that's when Ragnar shows up. Well, they decide, we're going to take this kid, and she's not going to let us probably. So, hey, Android, whatever his name was, because they had an Android too, who was a newer model. And she was like, yeah, she won't be no problem. She's like an older model. I'll be able to wipe her out, no problem. Well, she whoops his ass. Turns into fucking Iron Lady. and then goes up and destroys this whole entire ship except for the other kids on this human ship. So apparently there had been landing parties or whatever, so there's going to be some other humans, but she wiped out this entire ship and made it crash into the planet and saved the kids. And then just comes back down and says, hey, Campion, meet your new friends. I have some more chores to do. I also thought it was really interesting. They brought in something that you typically associate with fantasy is they brought in prophecy. And I thought that was pretty cool. Now, they've had prophecy in sci-fi before. Think about the Chosen One in Star Wars being Anakin Skywalker or whatever, although they kind of fucking ruined that with the new movies. But anyway, the point being they brought in prophecy. One of the humans while they were staying there said something like, you know, a boy alone on empty land. And of course, they thought this could be Cambion. So they think he's some kind of chosen one. And, you know, of course, they're at least leading us to believe that. So that's pretty damn interesting. So we'll see where that goes. And I really like how they closed this out because he had narrated a little bit at the beginning of the show to the very end where, you know, you don't know where he's saying this or if he's just narrating it or if it's actually a point in time or whatever. But he says something to the effect of, I know I'm not safe with her. I guess I never was. So he had been kind of on to her and realized in the end that she is some kind of wolf in sheep's clothing, which is the whole kind of theme here about this episode 1 anyway. And really interesting how they did this. So I'm really digging this show so far. We'll definitely see how it goes. I wasn't really sure about it, but I'm definitely interested in anything that Ridley Scott does. And I think it's really interesting, the stuff he explores and the way he does it. Let me know what you think. Did you check out Raised by Wolves? Are you willing to check out Raised by Wolves? And what about you fantasy fans who typically don't watch sci-fi, even though it's really just, you know, basically the same stories with a different setting, or you could say the same characters with different furniture. There's all kinds of ways to associate sci-fi versus fantasy, because I know most people here were Game of Thrones, Ice and Fire, fantasy fans, things like that. But a lot of people didn't want to get into Game of Thrones either because of dragons and wizards and shit. It ended up being, you know, they fell in love with it. So this is certainly not a Game of Thrones level type show, I wouldn't say, from just watching one episode. Obviously, nothing ever will be. But it looks really good so far, pretty good, and I'm really curious about the questions because they did open the can of worms and, you know, make you ask all these questions. You know, who programmed the droids? There's got to be humans behind that. Who are the other people? Why the religious war happened on Earth? Whatever. What caused that? And of course, her past and background being some kind of fucking war machine. If you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and a share. And of course, be sure to subscribe to get everything and click that notification bell so you're notified when I drop a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.